Hey you guys, it's Missy with the Little Green Bean, and today I am going to show you this really cute Cozy Cups mini quilt or mug rug pattern from Missouri Star Quilt Company. And we are going to make some little mini coffee cup mug rugs. They're so fun to make, and you can whip these out in no time. Got all of our fabrics cut here, so we're going to start with making the cup. And so you want to have 5 of one square and 4 of another, and you're going to lay them out alternating each print color, however you want to do it. And you're going to sew them together in rows. So I love having all of these different little snowmen. They're just too cute. So we're going to sew this row, and then this row. Use a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. For the sewing, you're going to take your pieces and you're going to line them up right sides together. We're going to just do this first row together. Then you open them up and add the next piece. If your fabric is directional, make sure you're paying attention to that and that your fabric is going the right direction the entire time. We don't want any upside down snowmen. Okay, so we're going to continue sewing the rows this way, and then once we're done, we're going to sew them the same way. We're going to sew the 3 rows together. Okay, so we have our 3 rows. Now you're going to go ahead and you're going to line up your seams here. All right, so here is the start of our cup. So now we need to make these little corners. So we're going to take our 2 background squares, and you're going to draw a diagonal line from one corner to the other. And you're going to stitch along that line. So you're going to line it up in the bottom corner. So line up your edges here and here. We're going to stitch along that line on both sides. You're going to take your ruler. You're going to measure a 1/4 of an inch from that stitch line and trim that off. And you're going to fold these open, and you're going to press them open with your iron. That is your coffee cup square. Next up, we're going to make the handle. So we've got a top piece and a bottom piece, and then you've got these pieces here. So we're first going to put the middle of the handle together. So you're going to sew your background piece to your print. Same way we did the squares. You're just going to sew along that edge with a 1/4 of an inch. And then for the top and the bottom, we're going to do it the same way we just did those corners with the snowman, with the cup portion. So go ahead and mark the diagonal line. So on the top one, it's going to go this direction. You're going to sew here, and then on the bottom piece, you're going to sew that way. Okay, next up we're going to trim, again, 1/4 of an inch from that seam, trim that off and press it open for both that top and the bottom. And then you're going to press open that middle section as well. And then we will put those pieces together. Now we have our pieces. So we're going to sew this part along the top edge, this one along the bottom. So there's our coffee cup, the handle. Then you're going to add 2 more background pieces. So the skinnier one goes up on the top. And then your wider piece goes along that bottom edge. Now we're going to take that over to the iron and we're going to press down those seams. Off the cup, we're going to add a little border to the top and the bottom. Then back over to the iron, press that open. Now we're going to add the side border pieces. Now we're going to press those sides open as well. Okay, so now to build this, I'm going to take my backer and some quilt batting, and I've got some basting spray. This just kind of helps hold it all in place, and I'm using this to protect my surface from any overspray. Lay that on and then just smooth out any wrinkles. Lay the mug rug on top. The way I like to do some basic quilting is I just like to start with a ruler and make a starting point, and I just like to draw that line. I'm using a heat erase pen for this. So decide there where you want your marks to be. And then same thing here. I just line it up with the ruler to make sure that I'm going the same direction, same angle, and draw your line. And then I use a guide on my sewing machine to keep all my lines straight and the same distance apart. So I start by just sewing along that first line. Then I use that line as my guide and I line it up with the guide to just make the stitches the rest of the way across. And so now we're going to trim it up. So we're going to square up the corners. I'm going to use the iron to remove the heat erase ink. Get rid of that. Clean up your edges. So I'm going to start with that. Square it all up. Because you cut your back and your batting larger than your finished size, you're just trimming off all that excess. But that's to ensure that you have enough and that it's always, you know, covering the entire back piece too. Now we're going to take our binding strips. I think 2 would have been enough, but I cut 3 just in case. I would rather always have a little bit extra than not enough. So to make your binding, this is how I like to make binding. There are a few different ways you can do this, and any way that is comfortable for you is the right way. Don't worry about right versus wrong. There is no wrong way. Whatever works. start by making a 45-degree line, and we're going to stitch that in place. Take off my little quilting tool. I'm going to trim off, leaving about 1/4 inch here. Now we're going to press this. I like to draw a 45-degree line at the top. This is the starting point of my binding. I'm going to trim that off. I guess I didn't need to draw the line. I could have just trimmed. So trim that off. So now I'm going to take this to the ironing board, and I'm going to press my seams, and I'm going to press it in half. But I'm also going to press this down. This is going to be my starting point. All right, now we've got our binding ready to go. I just cut off this little bit of excess right there. You can start anywhere you want, but I start in the center somewhere. So just line up your binding along your edge. What you're going to do first for this method is open this up, and you're going to simply stitch down 2 to 3 inches. Then you're going to close it. I'll show you that on the sewing machine. So go ahead and start, and then you're going to open it up. Stitch down a little bit. And we're going to close it, and we're going to pick up right where we left off. When you get to the corner, turn and sew off the edge. And then to miter your corners, simply fold it back and then back forward over itself. Line it up along that edge and continue sewing. And again, at the corner, you stop about 1/4 inch before, turn it 45 degrees, sew off that edge, and then miter. Just keep repeating this for each corner. Here's where it ends, and you're going to tuck this tail in. So give yourself a good inch or so. Cut it at an angle. And then you're going to tuck this into that little pocket that we made at the beginning. Tuck that in. Make sure it's all laying nice and flat. And then sew to where you started on the outside. So now your binding is attached to the front. We're going to wrap it around to the back. Now you can use whatever method you want. Personally, I love to glue baste here, but you can clip, pin, or stitch however you want. Trim all those threads, and then we're going to make sure however you fold it over, you're covering up that stitch line, because we are going to machine stitch this in place. If you want to hand stitch it, you can certainly do that too. I have glue basted this in place, so now when I go to stitch it, I don't need clips or anything. It's held by a temporary bond basting glue, and we're going to stitch in the ditch, which is right along where the binding meets the background, and we're going to stitch all the way around, and that will catch the edges of the back side of the binding. I like to start in the middle. I do not like to begin and end in a corner. So drop your needle down right alongside that binding, and then stitch slowly to make sure that you don't stitch up onto the front side of the binding. Back stitch when you get to where you started. And you can see your binding is caught in the edges. And that's it. Now you have an adorable mug rug, or you can keep going and make a bunch of these cute little coffee cups and make yourself a mini quilt. Either way, the project is just adorable.